Mother's Day, 3 weeks' time, a beautiful gift. Say something to the mothers out there, Marina.
Well, actually, I think this is a book for daughters, especially, if you are a mother as well, great. But if you are a daughter, especially if you are an eldest daughter, I think this book might resonate. I've been told by other daughters that this book really resonated with them because it's a story about a daughter-father relationship. So, well, a lot of daughters are also mothers. So if you want to get it for Mother's Day, great. Thank you. It's still out there in the bookstores. So, yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Charles Lee. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. Many visit and watch the videos and they find it very informative. They get excited. Some of them write to me on my email, but they don't subscribe. So would you do me a small favor? Would you just press that subscribe button? It'll be so good for all of us. Certainly it helps the channel grow. It adds a little bit of vitality to the channel. At the same time, the numbers get bigger and my heart gets bigger too. So just to know that you're with me, you enjoy the company, and I enjoy your company, you won't believe it. So please subscribe, press that button. I want to hear those bells jingle. And most of all, stay tuned, and I love your company. We'll talk again. Heart-to-heart conversations are so important today, where we want real honesty, we want truth, we want the real deal of what it is to live the real life. And Heart Talk is about issues, real issues concerning health, wealth, lifestyle, living, and most important of how to live to the fullest potential of what we are all capable of doing. And really, to really explain all this, and is my guest today. She's exemplary person that I've been so excited. I can't wait to just bring her on board for you to join in. She's a writer, she's an author, she's an activist, she's a mother, and she's the daughter to the most important political figure in modern Malaysia. Datin Paduka Marina Mahathir's life journey and testimony goes beyond the personal and into the heart of what truly matters in a family and in the life of a nation. Her most recent book, and I'm showing it to you right here, is The Apple and the Tree, which is a glimpse into the history of a nation's quest for survival and into the world of a life of a family that is all too familiar to many of us this past 50 years, including me. So without further ado, would you please join me to welcome Marina Mahathir. Welcome, Marina. Welcome to Heart Talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I want to congratulate you on this book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. It's a wonderful read. And while I'm holding it up, let me put a plug in right now. Friends, if you're watching in 3 weeks' time, we're going to celebrate Mother's Day. And this is a perfect gift to your mother, to those who are mothers-to-be, and those who are planning to get mother, and you'll be a mother someday. But to all the women out there, and including the men, to everyone, read this book cover to cover, and then you'll know who I'm talking about. So there you go. I mean, it's a beautiful, I can tell you one thing, it's so beautifully written. And the reason, and the reason why is because I'm going to spend this time with you, Marina, over the next 40, 45 minutes. You can spend the whole day with me talking, but 3 chapters are very personal to me. They just leapt out. And I had to pause, and it took me a while to finish the book because of these 3 chapters. And so I want to start off with the first part of it, and that is chapter 22. And the title is Taking a Breather. And to me, which is very important because it's like breaking free from what was, first love, and that was writing. And I think this conversation we're going to have will be very interesting for those who are thinking of writing, journalism, blogging, all that concern, because the very source of someone to write, Marina, is creativity. And I'm a big one for creativity, because if you don't have a creative mindset, you can't write. And so to me, creativity is the currency of the mind. And there's so much for the battle of the mind. And I can tell you one thing, I've been struggling for 2 years to write a book. And I got, as a surgeon, I've worked 40 years as a doctor. So much has happened in my life. And I've got this book out, and I thought, how on earth am I going to start this first page? And so when I went through your book and how you struggled through, just writing is one thing, but becoming an author, and a good one, and you're a good writer, is really a long task. So why writer? Why did you realize that you had this talent to write?
Well, I don't think I ever thought of it as a talent. I always wrote from young. I read a lot, and I think all writers read a lot. You really cannot write if you don't read a book. So I read a lot as a child, and I loved English in school. So and the days that I liked most were the days when we had to write essays, because I just like writing stories and finding different ways of talking about things, etc., etc. So English was always my favorite subject, and it was really a combination of loving reading and loving writing, because it really comes together. And I knew I always wanted to join a profession where I could write a lot. So I always wanted to be a journalist. Although a journalist, of course, writes nonfiction. And I was reading, and I almost always read fiction, which is two different things, actually. Nonfiction relies on actual facts, whereas fiction, you can make up things. So there's more creativity involved in writing fiction, which is something that I don't write. But nowadays, there's this thing called narrative nonfiction or creative nonfiction, where you write about something factual, such as about a person's life or a particular time, like a memoir, or about, a scientific subject or something, but you tell a story around it. And that makes it much more readable, I think, much more interesting. And that's what I've tried to do now, because I just got really tired of writing very straight, pieces, like for my column. I've been writing my column in the papers for more than 30 years. And I was getting a bit tired of that, because it's only about 800 to 1,000 words, and I have to be very concise. And it's sort of, although it's an opinion piece, so it doesn't have to be extremely dry like a news report, but still it relies on facts and things like that. So I really wanted to learn how to write something longer, and more with a better narrative, a more story-like narrative, and that's why I went off to study it.
They talk about the Holy Trinity when it comes to writing, and that is the writer, the characters, and the audience. How important it is for someone to write and think, who's going to read this? Because sometimes you get stuck, you think that nobody's going to bother about it. So how do you write, and how important is it to just get the facts out, but do you think about the audience too?
No.
Good.
Facts, of course, like when I write my column, it's usually based on something that's happened, something I've read in the papers, something like that. So that's the facts part. But I don't write for an audience, because if you do that, then you find that you are tailoring your opinions for an audience. and and you lose a lot of authenticity when you do that, because you are crafting it to suit a particular audience.
Right.
So I write for myself. I write what I think, because that's the only honest way of writing. And if it happens to resonate with readers out there, then that's great, you know.
You're right.
And as it happens, my column has resonated with a lot of people, so that's lucky for me. But you can't actually write a column anyway, for people. Books are slightly different. Of course, there are different genres of books, and it really matters whether you want to write, say, an academic book or a book that appeals to a wider audience.
Right.
So
Right.
then the language that you use would be different. But again, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be yourself when you write it. It has to be, you know, you cannot write it pretending to be someone else, really. It's very hard, unless you're writing fiction.
Right.
Of course, where people, you know, they write fantasy and they could be an
So,
alien, or
yeah.
in the case of the last Booker Prize winner, he was writing from a point of view of someone who was dead.
Right. So,
Um, so it's sort of different things, but the most important thing is to be yourself when you write.
no, this is pointed because I wanted to spend this time with you on this particular thing because, you know, you were doing what you love to do. That's your
Yeah.
first love. But you felt limited, you see, for many, many years until the age of what, 60. This, I call this a transition period where finally, why didn't you think of doing creative writing much, much earlier, stepping into it? Was it
Oh,
because the time was not right?
I think just life got in the way,
Okay,
really.
okay.
I mean, my first degree was in international relations because I thought that would be a good background for journalism. And then I did that, and then I did various things. I did PR, and I always had a communications base for everything I did. Even when I was leading an NGO, when I led the Malaysian AIDS Council, communication was very important because to me that was advocacy. You know, you're talking to the public
Absolutely.
about
That's
a
right.
very difficult issue, so you have to know how to communicate, whether it is in writing or orally or whatever, you know. So I guess, you know, and then in the meantime I got married and I had kids, and just things just got in the way, and it was only much later, when my kids are grown up and I felt that I could, you know, afford to go away, to do it.
No, I mean, this is why chapter 22 leapt out for me, because I was struggling to write this book, as I was telling you, for the last 2 years. And you know, the hallmark of a creative writer, in fact, creativity, is that they create opportunities. They don't wait for the opportunity to come to them. They create it. And that's the key of a creative writer. And so at the age of 61, you know, enrolling into university again, I mean, there must have been trepidation. There must have been the cold feet. What's going on? You know, what you're going to share? Because for me, coming out at 62, getting a master's degree in creative writing, I mean, that's your Oscar.
Well, I guess a PhD would be an ultimate.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. But what I mean is that it must have been a challenge. Talk to us about that, because there are many who would be, you know, they were even at this stage in their life, and they've always wanted to write. And where do they start? Or there's, let's say, somebody who's already a writer listening in right now, or a journalist. Would this be the time for them? When would be a good time for them to get on to something and specialize in it, like creative writing? Take up something, of course. You can take it any time as a writer's life.
Yeah, I think anytime. I mean, there's some people who start very young, and some people who, you know, start much later. I can't remember the name of, there's a particular novelist who got her first book published at 70 or something like that, you
So
know.
that's me.
And well, you know, And so it's really any time. The thing is, I mean, writing a book takes time.
Wow.
It really takes time. Some people takes years and years to write one book, and they may only have one book in them. Um, and that's, so everyone's life is different. So they have to carve it out for themselves. Actually, I don't know. Well, I chose the right time and the wrong time. I
Uh-huh.
went off in 2018, the year that Pakatan Harapan came into government,
Uh-huh.
and I was very much part of that. My dad, was in office again, and everyone was saying like, "Why are you going away now? There's so many things happening." So I was very unsure, but at the same time, I thought, I'm already, by that time, actually, I was 60, 61, and I thought if I don't go now,
Absolutely.
I'm already going to be very old in this class.
Uh-huh.
And if I don't go now, I will definitely be the oldest person in the class. As it happened, I was the second oldest in the class. But also, I was very glad that I did it then, that I made the decision to go then, because I finished in July 2019,
Right.
and six months later was COVID.
Oh dear. Okay.
And and I just kept saying, I thank God that I decided to go then, because
Absolutely.
I would have been so upset if
Absolutely.
everything got postponed because of COVID. As it was, my actual graduation ceremony was postponed for 2 years because of COVID.
Hmm.
But if I had to do all my classes online or whatever because of COVID, I would have been really upset. Because I
Yeah.
actually loved being in class. I had a wonderful class. I had 15 classmates who were just great. We got on so well, despite, range in ages and coming from everywhere, all sorts of different backgrounds. So, yeah,
I
so
mean, that's a
really, you
yeah,
just have to grasp the opportunity. And once you do,
absolutely.
you just do it,
Absolutely. That's the mind of a creative person actually. And yeah, I mean it's so inspiring for somebody who's listening in that there's no age limit to what you want to do.
No, not at
Create
all.
that opportunity, go for it, finish it, and be happy with it. That's what I had to kind of like, spend a year now and a half by myself, like a sabbatical, just to put all my journey on a paper so that it'll
Yeah.
bless somebody else's life. And if I
Well,
didn't do it now, I'll have to write from heaven.
well, it is really important to write things down, because I keep telling people a book that's in your head is not a book. It,
Absolutely. Well done.
it
Yeah.
has to be seen by other people, before you can call it a book. So even if you just start writing a little bit, one of the things that I did while I was writing the book, um, because I was doing an online course as well on memoir writing.
Mhm.
And they recommended that every morning when you get up, before you do anything else, you try and write 500 words. And that's really a great exercise, actually. Just whatever you think of before your mind gets filled with anything else
Goes
or
into a
even
default mode.
polluted,
Yeah.
you just write. And I found that really helpful, and they became the genesis of a lot of the chapters of the book.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, this is wonderful to listen. And for those, when you talk to somebody, like especially for me, as a father who's a doctor, and if a child comes up and if my son come up, all three of them are doctors today. But if one of them had come up and said, "Daddy, I want to go and do writing," I would have said, "What?" Because many of them feel that way. Journalism. I know of a journalist friend who's hopping from one magazine kind of thing to another because they only get paid for 1,500, 2,000 ringgit. And then I read about you at 800 ringgit. It was a time of ecstasy for you to take your family out for dinner. So what
Yeah,
is
well,
it?
first job and all that. But there are some great doctors who have become writers,
Yeah,
best-selling writers.
you're looking at
You
one.
know, Well, no, I mean fiction writers.
I know, yeah.
I don't know whether you've read Atul Gawande, who wrote. He didn't write fiction. He writes non-fiction. Have
Uh-huh.
you heard of him?
What's his name again?
Atul Gawande. He's Indian American. He's American actually, and he actually wrote a whole book about death.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But it's so moving. It's
Ah,
so wonderful. And it's really, he's just contrasting the way Americans face it and Indians, like his father back in India,
right.
and how, you have the support and all that, whereas in America you get put in a home, maybe, that sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's a wonderful, I can't, you can Google it, but I can't
I
remember
will.
the name
Well,
of
I've
the
got the
book.
name down. I've got the name down. But
Yeah.
okay, so
And
yeah.
there's also, I think his name is Abraham something, wrote a book called Cutting in Stone, I think.
Uh-huh.
It's about a doctor in Ethiopia. He's Indian, but he wrote this book, fiction, about being a doctor in this small town in Ethiopia. And that
Right.
was the time of the war, and it's the setting is fantastic, the whole story is fantastic,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's one of the best books I've ever written.
I mean, I agree
I've
with you.
ever read. I mean,
Really, I'm going to
yeah.
follow that up because there's power in the storytelling.
Yeah,
And,
I'll give you all the
no worries.
names
I've read
later.
Dr. Jill Folte, who had a stroke, and how she came out of that. So there's a lot of that going on. But
There's so many,
yeah, but the question is, which you have really pointed in this book, he has set the bar so high. The point is to be a good writer. You see, which you are.
I suppose that's kind of subjective
Is that right?
also.
Okay.
I think so, but I find that it's a very strange thing in Malaysia. People read books, people read international bestsellers and all that, but sometimes they are accepting of local writers who don't write as well just because they are local.
Right, right.
There are some really good Malaysian writers. A lot of them are overseas. People like Tash Au, Prita Samarasan,
Yeah.
one of them. Tan Tuan Eng is coming out with a new book. Um, and there are lots of, and I'm not saying everyone is terrible, but there are some books which I've read, which are just so badly written.
Yeah, well,
And I don't know why people accept that. It's the same in movies, we see
absolutely.
all the big international movies and even small films from places like Iran or wherever, which are so good.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
yet for local movies, we accept much lower standards. I don't get that.
I think this country needs a creative writing academy.
Some of the universities have some sort of writing courses. A lot of it is geared towards like mass comm, like advertising or PR.
Okay.
But writing novels or writing creative nonfiction, I'm not sure there is. A journalism school, of course, places like UITM and USM, I think they have good mass comm
Okay.
degree courses where
Okay.
people do learn to write. But I'm not sure about writing fiction or narrative nonfiction. I'm not sure whether that's available here. I must say I didn't really look it up,
Okay.
but it
It's
would be good because it's a totally different thing
absolutely.
entirely.
I'm sure.
When you read like feature stories in the newspapers here, and you read feature stories that are in the New York Times or the Guardian or long read. A lot of people here say that nobody reads long features anymore. They just want short things, which is quite true, and you can blame it all on social media. But at the same time, I think we don't even try to see if there's anyone who will, read something longer. By the way, I should mention there are individuals who teach creative writing.
I'm
People
sure.
like Sharon Barker and all like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So not to
Well, well,
exclude
well,
them.
well, thank you for mentioning that. Well, I'm going to switch gears now to something more real and passionate and something that I embraced. And that is chapter 1, My Beginnings. Okay. And when I was reading it, it was really down memory lane. It was very nostalgic for me because you read the books that I read, Enid Blyton, Famous Five. You watched the
Mm.
TV shows that I did, Partridge Family and David Cassidy and the Jetsons and all that. I mean, those were the days, And I want to just read a paragraph, which to me was quite striking. And I have your permission, as the book is out anyway. But let me just set the scene. I mean, this is the little town Alostar, Jalan Maxwell, house 929. And you go into very detail, which I want to really congratulate you, but I'm going to read it because the purpose of memory, Marina, is not just to remind ourselves of the past, but to extract out of it past lessons that we can use to structure the future. That's the purpose of memory. Otherwise, it'll forever be in the past, you see. But what can we learn out of it? And so I'm going to read page 5. I have your permission because the book's out in the market, okay? It's already out there. When I look back at those days as an adult, a striking fact hits me, and it hit me too. As a child, it had not occurred to me that most of the top civil servants who were our neighbors were non-Malays, something that would be rare these days. I was friends with the children of the Wongs, the Ongs, the Foos, the Nayagams, the Richies, the Sodis, the Sidus, and the Vergises, because they all went to school with me. All were the offspring of my parents' friends and colleagues, with little thought of our differences at all. We went to each other's parties and festive occasions without fussing over whether, like today, we needed to worry about the food served or not. Our streets were safe enough that we could walk to each other's homes and would always be welcomed. Now, when I read that, I paused. I looked out through the window and I started to sing the song by Peter, Paul, and Mary, where have all the flowers gone? Yeah, long time passing. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? And when I sang that, I was thinking of this garden outside in Jalan Maxwell. It's like a rose garden. Remember Lynn Anderson, I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden. And
Yeah.
if your gardener, Pak Hashim, was still around, the pains he took to cultivate that jewel in the crown that he talked about, your own garden, I feel that we have lost that whole garden of beautiful roses of different shades, different people. I can remember growing up in that area. My dad was an engineer, and I can still remember my neighbors. There was a family called Rasaya who had 11 children. And in that garden down there, there was a durian tree. And every time the durian fell at night, there will be there'll be a sound, So all of us are run out thinking we'll get the durian. And that guy, one of his 11 children, would have already taken it. So we have these pleasant memories. But, Marina, when you look back at this rose garden with different colors, that is truly Malaysia, isn't it? Where we can just go into each other's homes and, celebrate without fussing around. And today, when I think of that paragraph, how the creepers and the thorns and the weeds have come into this garden. I want your thoughts on that paragraph because it was very personal and I could feel it. And you and I are in a stage in life where we miss those moments. What's happened?
Well, I think that was really to show one of the big differences between that time and now, that, I lived in this sort of civil servant enclave in Alostar, and everybody was a different race. I mean, there was such a thing as a chief education officer who's Chinese. There were 2 Mr. Ongs and then a Mr. Nayagam. I remember them very well because, of course, I knew their children, and I'm still friends with them, by the way. And nowadays, I think it doesn't happen anymore partly because there are not that many non-Malays now in the civil service. And if there were, I don't know how far up they would get. There's still a few, I think, in a very technical type of, I don't know, in Ministry of Trade and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was an innocent time, I think, and a great time, and it's a pity that for most Malaysians they're not seeing this anymore, and it goes back to schools, and my schools are diverse,
Absolutely, yeah.
I went to a convent school, of course, so that kind of filters out some people, filters out Malays, for instance, because they're all worried about going to a convent school. But it meant that I grew up with a whole bunch of very different girls, and I'm still friends with them. We still have a WhatsApp group going. There are Malay girls in there, and we all find that we haven't changed very much in our attitudes. And to me, I think the richness of that diversity is so important, because you get different experiences, and you also learn how to be accepting of differences, and to accommodate that, because that's part of life. If you accommodate someone else's particular specific whatever, then they will do it for you as well. And again, I never fussed about going to a friend's house, a non-Muslim friend's house, for a party, because they would know already what to do, right? And if they and they tell me, you can have this one, you can have that one. I said, that's fine, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm not going to starve after all.
Yeah.
And anyway, as a little kid, you're just more interested in playing, right? And birthday cake more than anything else. And it's really it's too bad that for a large part of Malaysians nowadays, they're kind of living in silos. I'm lucky in that I really have a diversity of friends. I have two best friends. One is Chinese and one is Indian. I mean, we are the epitome of Muhibah. And we've been friends for a long time. We go off on retreats together, that sort of thing. And we're so used to this. And I'm, I nowadays, actually, talking about diversity, the modern diversity, I'm having friends over to the house, and one of them messaged me and said, Marina, I have to tell you that I'm vegan. And like, oh, what?
Yeah, right.
But you accommodate.
Of course.
Because you want them to feel comfortable at home. You want them to be able to eat something.
Yeah.
So you prepare at least one or two dishes that are vegan so that they can eat it.
Yeah.
And that's what you do,
This is this is the essence of fellowship. This is the meaning of togetherness. And I can tell you one thing.
Really,
and we have lost it. I mean, I've been in a doctor for 40 years, of course, a fixed mindset as a doctor. But having said that, when I was in Johor Bahru, I mean, I had the Jacobs over and we used to jam with our guitars, and all the Sikhs will come and the fellow will bring his chapati with his mutton. Those were the days, those were the days, my friends. But
what I'm trying to say that I don't think it's completely gone. I don't think it's completely gone. I think it's still there. I think among ordinary people, it's still there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not highlighted enough. And I think it's just been overtaken by the bad news all the time. The cases where people are being, oh, I don't want that. Oh, I don't want that,
Yeah.
Rather than the times when people actually do accept and have, the differences and enjoy it.
Yeah. I hear you, because the weeds and, either it's politics or religion or what has come into this beautiful garden that you could see along Jalan Maxwell. All of us grew up in that. And that's the worry, or that's the thing that a lot of people now have got so insensitive to it. They've got, thickened, by all that is going on, that they just live their own life. They couldn't care. And
Yeah. I wouldn't call religion a weed.
No, what I mean is all the other stuff.
It's a particular interpretation, is
Yeah.
what I would say.
Yeah.
Although politics, I think, is a weed.
Okay.
But,
No, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the beautiful diversity. I mean, you spent your time in Japan.
yes.
And you saw that it's all just one face. And then you come back home and then you see the multitude of different,
Yeah. I know. I've said this many times. It was like going from a black and white movie to a color movie, Although I love Japan, and I'll go back anytime
of course.
for different reasons. But
Absolutely.
when everything is the same and everyone strives to be the same, you do get bored with it. You sort of yearn for color and difference, and we're so used to it. We don't realize what a big advantage it is. It's a huge advantage.
It is.
When you go to other places where it's much more mono-ethnic or whatever, they don't get it. They don't, like all of us, understand. We might not speak fluently, but we understand at least 2 or 3 languages.
Yeah.
That's normal. That's normal for us.
Yes.
And you go to countries where they are monolingual.
Yeah.
And they can't understand how come we can, because when you know different languages, your brain also
of course
is different. You switch,
of course.
differently. But if you only know one, your thinking is only one way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
this is
we
why
have that advantage.
It is
that we don't realize and don't appreciate.
Yes. No, I'm glad you're bringing it up because, as an activist, there's so many things that we actively think and sought for. And unless we have intelligent, intellectual people with us who are thinking the same way and not through a microscope, but they have a telescopic vision of all the good things that we have together. What a powerful country this is. It's such a beautiful country. I came to Sabah in 89, which is about, 35 years ago, to set up the first department of plastic surgery. And I never went back because it was such a beautiful state, beautiful people. And so I think, but I brought it up because it's a part of life that we miss. And I know my children are all in their 30s now as doctors, and they will carve a life of their own. But there's no other place than Malaysia. So I thought I should bring that up because I could feel you writing that. And to remember each family by their surnames, shows the closeness of that moment in time. Okay, so I thought that would be, I'm just trying to pull in all the good things so that people get to read the whole book. And so finally, I come to the third part and the last part, which is chapter 14. And I've titled it, Lest We Forget. And that is the man whose heart stopped twice. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a very personal chapter because 11 years ago, I had open heart surgery. And I know what I went through. And to have my prime minister, the 4th and the 7th, to have gone through 3 times to have his chest opened, and the second was the third one was because of infection or whatever. But we forget all these moments because of how much it takes a person to go through that kind of a strain. I had my family on my heart. Tun Dr. Mahathir had not only his family, but he had a nation on his heart. And a lot of people forget that. And so I share with you, and let me just share this a little bit of time with you. So I share with you the anxiousness and the pain and the worry and the hopelessness of not knowing the outcome. And I can tell you one thing, you became a pretty good cardiothoracic intern. as I read the chapter, because you were talking about intubation and all that. But Marina, on the night before my surgery, I wrote 3 letters to each of my children because I knew that there was a chance I may not see them again. And that was a humbling moment for me as a surgeon. I knew the risk. And I wrote the closest of things in my heart to my children in a letter, just in case I don't make it. And in fact, after surgery, I was in ICU, and I was a true symbol of what Malaysia is all about. I had my heart opened out by a Malaysian Malay. I had my legs veins harvested by a Malaysian Chinese. I had my tube extubated by a Malaysian Indian. And that was I in gratitude, thanking God for all these 3 people. And I'm thinking of the rose garden with all those flowers, And it was a reminder to me of what pain one goes through. Life is so fragile. And so 1982, 2007, I mean, those were tough years for the family and for you.
I think what we should remember also is that he entrusted himself into the hands of Malaysian doctors.
Yes, absolutely.
And he didn't go, elsewhere.
Yeah.
And because of that, he set up the IJN, which is a fantastic institution.
Yeah, I had my surgery there.
Yeah, they are fabulous doctors. I mean,
yes.
If you think I'm a good cardiothoracic intern, it's because I had the best teachers.
There you go.
They all taught me everything.
There you
because
go.
we had to know every detail of what was happening to our dad. So yeah.
No, that's why I feel that chapter was, wow, I really went through every line. And I mean, my cardiologist was my houseman 30 years ago. When I used to do my rounds, he would come in. He was a classic guy. And today he's head of cardiology in IJN. And so, how life spins, after 30 years, you meet the guys you go on with, and they are
I know. And the first time, it's amazing because the first time, they all look so young. They all look incredibly young. And now they're still taking care of him.
There you go.
And they've matured quite a bit, but they're still taking care of him. So it's quite incredible.
Yeah, I know.
It's a very close relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, his surgeon and I were together in General Hospital in the 1980s. So we were together, but it's wonderful. But I wanted to bring this up because, when your heart is stopped, people forget what a risk. And just give us 1 or 2 incidents, heart-wrenching moments that were personal for you.
Well, when they reeled him in, I mean, the night before, of course, the surgeons explained to us what the whole procedure is, and that they have to stop the heart and do what they have to do, and then they have to restart it, and the risk is in the restarting. And when they stop it, he's of course not technically dead because he's on a machine that does the work of the heart.
Absolutely.
The restarting, because obviously you can't live on a machine forever. Your heart needs to start again, and that's the risk. And it's it's a scary 3 or 4 hours or whatever that we had to wait to know what happens. And then he comes out of it. And then, like I said in the book, it's one thing. The operation itself is one thing. The recovery is something else. And I don't know whether everyone talks about the recovery period as much, because it depends. I don't know, because my dad was older. Although the first time I think he was 63 or something. He's younger than I am now, actually. But the older you are, the recovery takes longer, and a lot of it depends on your mind, right? Your mind really controls the way your body works.
Yes.
And if you don't have the right mindset, if you feel despair, depressed and everything, it's you're not going to start up again,
No,
I mean, I keep saying the whole body is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
It relies on everything. I mean, the heart, the lungs rely on the heart, the blood system relies on the way the heart pumps, and the liver and everything, the kidneys and the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my dad, if nothing else, I mean, he's not particularly athletic or whatever, but his mind is really what's pulled him through, not just then, but other times too, when he's been down. I mean, just even last year,
Yeah.
he was very ill last year, and we thought, gosh, this is it. How could he possibly survive this? And he pulled himself out of it
No. Yeah.
just
Absolutely.
through his mind.
Fine. Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah.
right, because I remember, the moment that my tube was taken out, and one of the first who came up to see me in the ICU was my daughter, and Sarah, and she came in, and I said, take the camera and take a picture of me. And there was I, with the tube, and I had just been extubated. I was taking my breath, and she said, Daddy, what do you want this picture for? I said, I'm going to start a website called HEARTtalk. And that's where HEARTtalk started from when I was in ICU. And till today, it's the mind that keeps going on. And I think it's, like I said, creativity is a currency that feeds the mind. So on that note, I mean, it's a beautiful chapter to read, to understand the trials of a family. And I tell you, open heart surgery is not an easy walk.
No.
And, the best friend I had, Marina, after the surgery, was a small pillow that was given to me.
Yeah. You hold and then you cough.
Every
Yeah.
cough, every
You have to cough.
sneeze, I would hold that pillow. It was the closest I could ever have. And
Yeah.
but and that's the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. I was in the army for 2 years as a captain, seconded from the Ministry of Health. And so we were taught about recce. You got to recce a situation before you go into it. And that's why I made my trip to the Bajana Leadership Foundation. I made my way up the steps. I was talking to the guard, and I said, "Just don't do these steps." And he said, "Yeah, if he's well, and if he's not, he will use the lift." So I did a 2-minute kind of a workup with my videos and all that. And next day I had COVID. So, so the conversation. But anyway, I want to thank you for the service and what you went through, and just thank you that you were there for him. And which brings me to the title of your book, The Apple and the Tree. And so we'll close with that, because there's an old patriarchal saying that goes like this: keep me as the apple of your eye, and hide me under the shadow of your wings. So the apple of the eye is the pupil that you see in the eye. And if you go close enough to a person, you can see the reflection of the person in the pupil. And of course, it's a much smaller little pupil. So you're the little girl in the father's eye. And it's a reflection of how close love is when you talk about the apple and the pupil of the apple. So I wanted to leave that with you, that, there's not a single page that goes without 3 letters, Dad. And I think that's a beautiful thing to read about, that the closeness of a daughter and the father writing about her journey. And again, the cost of having to, share that father with a nation is not an easy one. And so
it's also about a struggle, though, it's about a struggle to be my own person.
Absolutely, which is why
that is really the thrust of the book.
It is.
Yeah.
Coming out and carving a future and a destiny for yourself. And I think this is something well lived and well done. And that's why I keep putting a plug in again. Go for the PhD, because it's just begun. Now, Mother's Day, 3 weeks' time, a beautiful gift. Say something to the mothers out there, Marina.
Well, actually, I think this is a book for daughters.
Okay. Yeah, it's a gift for the mothers.
Especially, I mean, if you are a mother as well, great. But if you are a daughter, especially if you are an eldest daughter, I think this book might resonate. I mean, I've been told by other daughters that this book really resonated with them, because it's a story about a daughter-father relationship. So well, a lot of daughters are also mothers. So if you want to get it for Mother's Day, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's still out there in the bookstores.
Okay.
So yeah, any of the big
Well, it's a
stores.
perfect read. I enjoyed it, and I've certainly enjoyed this conversation with you. It was really a struggle in the beginning. I was thinking to myself, I don't want to talk to her about all the other stuff that's going on. I just wanted to hear her heart, which is what Heart Talk is all about. You are the Ishon of your father's eye, which is the apple of his eye. Remember that. It's how close it is when your father. I have a daughter, Sarah, and the love of my life. So I know what it means to have a daughter too. And so let me end by thanking you for joining me on Heart Talk. But I'd like to end with
Pleasure.
these words written by Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. And I
I
think,
know that quote.
this book is a book that tells it all bluntly, truthfully, and to the heart of the matter, which is about living life to its fullest potential. And so once again, congratulations. There's
Thank
more
you.
work. We need you more. Be an activist that you are. And we look forward to the second book soon.
No, I don't know. Hopefully, hopefully.
Okay. Well, thank you once again, Marina. Thank you for joining
All
me
right.
on Heart Talk. So for those
Thank
of
you.
you who have joined in, listen, get to the bookstore today and get that book out. Give it to whoever you want it, but read the whole book. Never judge a book by its cover. Read it. And once again, from all of us here, from my girls, Mary and Heidi, thank you once again, Marina Mahathir.
Thank you. Thanks.